Right, so we are this is lesson officially lesson 2 now. So we're carrying on today with our tree drawings that we were doing. However, we can also carry on with our or start to look at another element of landscapes for this subject, and that will be looking at some buildings. So in the email I put a link to the drive, and on there are lots of different images of old sort of rustic kind of barns from Yorkshire and places like that I thought would be a really good subject to focus on for drawing techniques, also maybe a touch of perspective, and using inks. So last week I did use some inks on one of the trees that we did, or one of the barky sort of trees that we did, because a few people said, oh gosh, I'm struggling with the bark. So we had a closer look at some of that last week, and I used the inks to do a wash with the tonal ranges, and then work back over the top with some of the detail and a more sort of round or small brush. So we'll have a look at that stuff, and I'll show you where I've got to as far as starting off with the buildings go, and I'll do a new one alongside of that. And I've also got a new pen that I'd like to show you that I came across and couldn't resist. So that might be quite interesting as well, because it gives different marks and things like that. Gives you more flexibility in the way you use stuff. All right, so we go over to here, over to the desk. So these are the kinds of things we've been working on so far. The one in the bottom right-hand corner is the sort of S-shaped or snaking kind of old barky sort of tree, if you like, and then the other couple of drawings are the ones that we've been working on, where I've talked about adding tone then adding detail, or adding detail then adding tone. So I've put the video of all of this now onto the website, so if you want to have a look at it, or the YouTube site, then it's there for you to go through. Okay, and we're kind of I put this back up because we're going to be looking a little bit of buildings and architecture, and some of these are quite nice, particularly the one, I really love the one on the left hand side with all those beautiful dry stone walls at the bottom, and then the wonderful detail on the tree and so forth. And then we've got a little one of a bridge over on the other side there. So we're going to sort of be having a look at some of that sort of stuff over the next few days, but or a few lessons, and then but only looking at barns and things like that as well. Okay, so again, this is the sort of thing we were looking at here, and I talked about how the density of marks can create this kind of shadow that we're looking for, or the 3D form if you make some of the marks a slightly different shape at the side, and then reduce them towards that one in the center there, the darkest one, reduce the marks in the middle but increase them at the sides to show that 3D form. And there were a few examples of similar kinds of trees to the ones that I was working on as well. Okay, and I think I'll put all those on the drive as well for you. So if you do want to have a closer look at those, then you can do that. I think also in the email I put some of these in there for you too, so you could download them straight off there as well. All right, okay, so this is the kind of thing that I want to focus on in this lesson today. So there's an element of perspective in this. There's an element of perspective in a landscape anyway, but with the buildings, we've got these obviously much more blocky kinds of shapes. And I'll talk a little bit about how you show the perspective in some of these drawings. I've got an example of one that I can talk about, and I've also been drawing one of these as well. Well, actually, it's a bit more detailed than that, but I'm going to show you that in a second too. So I'll just turn that off and put this on, hopefully. Can't see it now. No, it's not coming up. Hang on a sec. There we go. I've just got to turn the other ones off first. There we go. so that we can see everything a bit better. Right. There we go. So much stuff on here. I need to get rid of some of it. There, I think that's a bit better. Right. So I found this picture of some like a house or a village called Thwaite, which I think's in Yorkshire, isn't it? So in this village, it's got a really nice bridge and some houses and things there that I thought would be really nice as a subject to work from. It's a bit more detailed than perhaps some of the photos that I've put onto the drive and things, but I did this last week in order just to show you how I start things off, really. And you can download this sheet if you want it to. So number one here, I started very quickly mapping out the structure of the image. So you can easily correct and adjust the drawing earlier on. And we talked a bit about that last week, and the same sort of goes with this, really. So you can see on here that I've really just very, very quickly and very loosely drawn out those shapes, allowing myself to perhaps make errors or, adjustments and things. And then, as you can see, once I was a bit more happy with that, I started to add some of the stones, some of the larger sort of shapes within that structure. And then the next thing to do, once I was confident about that, is to start filling all those details in with some of the mark making that we've been looking at on those sheets that I showed you before. So now we're starting to see a much more detailed drawing. And so I'm going to be working over this with the ink, the Quink ink, watered down to begin with, to add the tones, very much like I did last week with the tree, which I'll show you again in a few seconds. So just going back to this, number two, you're adding further details, making adjustments as you go. Then once happy with the structure, start to work into the details. Now I've also got a black and white version of this, which I printed out and have on my desk. So that's quite useful sometimes, is to look at the black and white version to avoid the distraction of the colour, which I've mentioned a few times previously. Okay, right. So here's the full size picture, and you can see there's lots of details and things on there that we can look at. Can't seem to get anything to move tonight. There we go. Right. So I've decided I'm going to go into this with the inks first of all, very much like I did the tree, and then I'm going to start adding the details. And I'm really excited because I've got a new pen I'm going to mess about with on this as well, which I'll show you in just a few seconds. And then I've got a second building, which is actually this one down on the right-hand side that I'm going to start with as well, sketching out to give you a little demo of how I'd start drawing something out like this. So that'll be another element of landscapes included there. All right. So over to the pages or the desktop. So there's the original drawings that we're working on. There's a worksheet with these on as well. So if you remember, I was looking at the tone and shadow on this, particularly the effect of the light hitting one side of the tree and the shadows on the other. And then I added the details in after I'd done the shading. And then on here, I did all the details and lines after getting the main shapes, and then worked in with some shadow and pencil. So that was the first week or two. And then over here last week, we were looking at this beautiful sort of sculptured, weathered tree trunk, which again I've done using detail combined with mark making and shading. And then over here you can see quite clearly how I've started this one. I'll zoom in a little bit at this point. So you can see here that in order to start understanding the structure and the shape of it, I was looking at the tones and shadows on the tree, and then I was using very, very pale, almost just like I said last week, watered down ink to start just mapping that in. And then I started using a very pointy brush, and I was just minutely putting in those details, stippling and things like that on the top. And then as we go, layering in some heavier shadows in there as well. Okay, and I mentioned, I think, as well, that you can use like a white pen, very much like one of these, if you want to add extra highlights, or even a white pencil can sometimes work very well too. All right, okay, so over here is the drawing that I'll start working on in a few minutes. But first of all, I'm going to start by sketching out this beautiful little, looks like a ruined barn or something like that in Yorkshire. My prints have come out quite light here, but I'm not too worried about that. So I've got another version of it here. There's the colour version, a little bit smaller. So one thing that can be helpful if you're doing a whole sort of landscape and you want to get things in the right place can sometimes be to literally draw, and we are going freehand here rather than using the grids, which we often do. So this is a much looser and quicker approach to doing the landscape. So on here we need to sort of work out where the horizon is and perhaps where this road goes through here, to help us sort of place the object. So, and I'm doing this by eye as well. So we've got about that much at the top for the horizon. I hope you can all see it. I'll just come in a bit more because I'm doing it quite lightly. Oh, there's Sue, back from the book club, I think. Right, so there's the horizon very loosely, and then about the same distance just below that we can see the beginnings of that hill, and then less than halfway down is where it goes to. So now we've got the overall kind of, we've almost created a landscape here with just a few lines. We can then start to sketch in the shapes of the building. So, and if you're thinking, well, where does that go? You can do some lines. You could perhaps do some lines like this. So there's the corner of the building, and I can work out whereabouts that is by drawing some vertical lines. And the other one is somewhere there. So we're going to go here like that. So I've got the outer sort of sides and this corner, and the bottom half of the building is about the same distance, look, as the skyline. So if I use my pencil to measure that out, I can put a line in across here. Right. And then we can start to sort of put the rest of the building in. So now one important thing is to remember that we are using linear perspective here. So the bottom of the building is going to be a different angle to the top of the building. So if you look here, I've got the bottom of the building in there. Now the top, that means that as we go up the building, and this all depends on what angle the viewer is at as well, but as you go up the building, you can see the line is going to change slightly like this, right? And I'll draw that in now so we can get that. So the top corner of the building there comes almost horizontally across and is about halfway up my picture. So somewhere there. And then it doesn't go up, it goes across and slightly down because we're in perspective. So these two lines here, if you continue those two lines on, they would eventually disappear into like a point because it's perspective. And we do the same on the other side. So, and I am doing this quite loosely still, even though it looks like I'm being very calculated about it. I'm just drawing out the basic shapes of this building so that I can then start to work out the rest, where the details are going to go. So now on the slant of the roof, this is an idea that you could try, is hold your pencil like this, move it across, and then put it in. So hold your pencil, move it across, and then put it in like that. And I could do the same over on this side, like that, and the same perhaps on the other side. There we go. And then just below the horizon here is the height of the house, and you'll notice that it goes down, look, rather than straight across. So I'm going to put that in there like that. So now I've got the overall structure of the building itself. Okay, so it does take a bit of practice to get perspective right, but it's worth remembering that you've got to look really carefully at all the angles that particular object or building creates in order to get that perspective. That said, quite a few of the buildings that I've put on the site there are literally straight on. You're looking straight at it, so it would be a box, basically, a rectangle with a roof on it and things. So that might be a better option for exploring this subject. I've chosen this because I wanted to talk a little bit about perspective first of all. Okay, so there's our shape, and then I can start working out or plotting in very loosely again some of the details, like the doorway. So these doorways, actually, it might be the same sort of shape, but one of them's slightly further away. So I'm going to make it a little bit, just a little bit narrower than the other one, like that. Okay, and there's a little steppy bit down here because the building is on kind of a slope. So there's actually a little bit of a slope going up here, and it meets that doorway just down there, like that. Okay, oh, and I've got a little door there, and there's a little ledge here, and a post on top. So there. So I'm not going to do too much more on that because I'm just going to talk a bit more. I'll come back to this in a few minutes, but I'm going to add some tones and things to the other drawing that I've got over here as well, so you can see what I'd like you to do next before I carry on with that one. So I've got my, like I did last week, I've got the Parker Quink ink here, and this stuff is brilliant because it goes a long way with this kind of work. So I've just put a tiny bit in the middle of the this dish just here, the same one that I was using last week. So on a black and white copy, if you've only got a colour image, you can convert it on your phone. If you've got it on your phone, that is, you can use the editing software on the phone to actually convert it into a black and white picture. And we've done that before in lessons, but if anyone wants me to show them later, we can do that. So if you remember, I talked about the water being not too dark, or the ink not being too dark. So just add some water to make it lighter. And then you can pick out some of the tones to get you started. And I think it's quite nice to start with some of the darker tones, but without actually making them dark straight away. So over the top of my picture, my drawing, and I haven't spent like ages and ages on this drawing. I literally have got just most of the details and things that I need to get me started on adding in the tones and things. Oh, sorry, bring it up a little bit. The water's quite dark too, so I'm gonna do some ripply sort of brush strokes in there as well. So remember, we don't have to do it too dark straight away, because we can build layers of tone as we progress, which is more fun, because you kind of see the image being revealed very gradually as you work. Okay, so I can also, my windows on here aren't quite in the right place, but I'm not too worried about it, if I'm honest with you. I just want to put those in, because it still looks quite good. And then I'm going to add a little bit of gentle tone onto the roof of that as well. So this will help you understand where all the lights and the darks are within this picture, and where you need to, or where you could apply some of the different marks and things on top. So this tree over here, look, I can see that on the original photo it's quite dark, so I'm just gonna do that, because that's quite an obvious bit to look at, because it is dark already. But again, I'm not going too dark with it straight away. And then over here on the house, there's a bit of a dark bit in the background. And then I can also do these rocks, or the dry stone wall. There's some darker bits in there as well. So the mark making and things can come after this, when I've put in enough tone for me to understand and be able to recognize the different parts of the image nice and quickly. Down here, there's a little bit of a wall. So I'm going to start just, again, not going black, but just going slightly darker. So we can just recognize that a little bit. And then over here, I'll put in some little dashes and things for the rocks. I keep saying rocks, but they're like stones, aren't they, for the dry stone wall. Like that. And I'm going to do the grass in front of the house with a single tone on it as well. And there's actually a barn just there that I hadn't noticed. I'll put that in. And then I could do the sky as well, straight off, with a nice watered down tone as well. So I'm just going to brush that with a big flat brush, just to cover that area with a little bit of a tone, because I think it's a clear sky actually, isn't it? I can't remember what the original looks like at the moment, but the black and white one has just got a little bit of tone on it. Okay, so obviously you can see how that's starting to sort of reveal a little bit more, come together. And you just keep going until you've got enough tone to work back into it. But don't overwork it. Just get enough tone to be able to see the different elements of the picture, like I was saying. And then you might need to let it dry for a few minutes before then applying your pens or your brush marks. So you could use a mixture of brush marks and pen marks. Rollerball is a really nice one to use. Okay. Now this pen that I've got just got it through the post, but I'll try and zoom in a little bit. It's a Japanese pen actually, and it's from a brand called Sailor. But I came across it on Instagram, so there was an artist using this pen and said it was brilliant and all that, and I thought I liked the look of it, so I got one this week. It's a bit like a fountain pen really, but I'll try and zoom in a bit and see if I can show you the nib. Right, here we go. There it is. So it's got a nib, which is, it's got a round piece on the end. Can you see that? It's got like a bent nib on the end. So the idea being is that you can tilt that at different angles, and it'll create different marks. So I'll do a little playing around over here. So if you go a bit lower, you can get these wider, thicker marks. Just see if I can get that in better focus. And then if I tilt it right forward, I can do really thin marks, all without changing pen. But you can get, I think you could get a little bit more expressive and have a bit more fun with something like this. So there's an immediacy to the marks because you're able to immediately change the angle of the pen to get some really interesting and expressive marks, which could work really well on a building or a landscape. I bought it with some ink as well. So it's carbon ink, which I've not heard of before. I don't know if that's a brand name. It's carbon ink, which is this stuff. And you can refill the pen so that you can keep using it and things, which is really nice. So yeah, it's called a sailor pen. So I'm going to use that on this drawing once I've put a little bit more tone in, and then later tonight I'll come back to the hut, or whatever you want to call it, stone hut that I had earlier. All right. So, but otherwise, a rollable pen is brilliant as well. As you know, we've used those before, but they're a lot of fun as well to do details on top. And as you saw me doing last week, I used just an ordinary sharp rounded brush to put marks and things in. So I don't know how dry this is now. I perhaps do a little bit on here. Yeah, it's not too bad. It's dried up already, enough for me to be able to put the marks on top. Come in again a little bit. And so with the pen, you can do, which is what I was doing last week, you can do smaller marks, you can do longer marks, with the brush. And if you look at the picture itself, of course, you can see where the light is falling. So on this particular bush, which is over there, it's darker on my right hand side, so I can put a few more marks on that side than the other to get a sense of light on the picture as well. And again, you don't have to do all of your lines and your marks really dark all the time. You can switch it around and do really pale brush strokes and things too. And as you can see on here, I've just layered the dark shadow of the window over the top of this grey that I put in earlier. And you can then put the tiles in. And again, I kind of, I don't go too heavily with all of the marks. So I'll do some lighter ones in there. So watered down a little bit, and then there's quite a dark area along the bottom of that. So I've gone in a little bit dark there, but not too worried. There. So you can see how things start to build up this way. Now the other thing you can do, of course, which I don't think I've got, I'll have to get that out in a minute, but while you're doing all of this, you can also use some candle wax. So if you put a bit of candle wax in the areas that you know are going to be particularly light, then when you put the ink on, it's going to resist, and you'll get some other nice details coming through and textures, which I'll do that in a few minutes. I just need to find a candle wax, or a wax candle, I should say. Okay, so that's the plan this evening. So if you've got any questions about that, or if while I'm working you've got any questions, then please ask, and I'll do my best to give you a helping hand with it. So I've put some washes down on the surface of this drawing of Thwaite, or Thwaite, however you say it. And the next thing I'm going to do is start using this pen from Sailor, which, as I mentioned earlier, has got some really lovely mark making that you can do, or it's got the opportunity to do lots of different lines, thin and thicker lines, as well as stipples and things, which you'll see me do on here. So I've just got this pen, so I really go I go right into it with all the mark making, especially down the front here. Often in a landscape, if you put in lots of detail and maybe darker, thicker marks towards the front of the image, then you can start to draw the attention of the viewer to the front of the image, and then straight through the whole thing towards the back. I do try to reduce the amount of marks I've got towards the back by not using the pen so much, but I probably went a little bit far with this, but yeah, I really enjoyed using the pen, so it was great to do. So here I'm using very watered down ink to do some stippling, so that it doesn't become too intense and detract from the front, but also is interesting enough for you to want to look towards the back. So some of the marks are directional as well. So the water marks, they go across through the river that's just below the house there. And you saw me also adding some more washes as well. So you can further, even if you put some marks down, you can further add watered down quink on top. We've got that really nice color on there as well, which comes with the quink. One thing I could have done as well, perhaps, is experimented with a little bit of bleach, or as I call it, sanitizing fluid as well, but I don't do that in this session. What I do is what I'm doing now, which is use a little bit of wax, candle wax, to explore a little bit of texture. And you see me just here adding the candle wax and then adding a little bit of watered down ink again. You can see that's resisting a little bit, particularly around near the bridge as it curves round towards us. Well, and some larger marks just down the bottom there, some larger marks, stipple marks at the front, which are now just off screen. So as I've said many times, the key thing is to keep looking back at the image that you're working from. But at the same time, it's also a really good idea to just be a bit looser and free and explore what the pen or the materials or the marks can do when you start to apply them. So in other words, being a bit creative and inventive with it as well, which is why I don't do so much of the looking really closely at each brick, or each blade of grass, or whatever you want to call it. It's more about bringing something of myself to the picture and having fun with it. So if your picture doesn't have exactly the same bricks or exactly the same proportions, sometimes it doesn't really matter. What matters is how interesting what you're adding to the picture is, and what it brings to the picture, and if people are going to enjoy looking at it. So sometimes, you might think, well, that's a bit overdone, or there's too many marks on there, or it's too busy. But at the same time, it might be interesting from another point of view to be able to have a look at it and enjoy it. And that's certainly something you can do when you're in an art class or an art club, or you're just playing around on your own for a bit of fun.
just enjoy the process. And you can see I'm really doing that here. So the other important thing to remember is, you can put marks down, but you can also layer those marks on top of each other and build up the surface with lots of different marks. So you see I've just put a few darker sort of bits in there in the tree at the back. And I put a little bit of wax crayon in the sky, and then I did another wash over the top. So that wax crayon resisted the wash. But we've still got a bit of the grey from before underneath. So really, really enjoyable drawing to do. So in a second or two, I go on to the drawing, which I was demonstrating on earlier, of the old barn. But that was fun doing that with my new pen, which is a sailor pen, by the way, with 52-degree angle on it or something. So here I just go straight in with the wax crayons or the candle. And then we start doing a wash over the top. So I'm going quite quickly with this. Could take a bit more time over it. I'm trying to get as much done or a bit done during the lesson so that we can see the whole process again. So having earlier mapped out the larger shapes of the building, looking a little bit at perspective, I can then start to confidently put in some of the bricks and the details that I'm really interested in. And then here you can see I'm adding a little bit of wax crayon, not everywhere, just in a few bits. And I also do a few blades of grass, which I might have done more of. But I was really taking my time with this. But I do find that sometimes it's really good to work a bit quicker, because you have that spontaneity in the hand when you're working, which brings about sometimes unexpected results. Some you might not like, of course, but some perhaps that actually you think, wow, that's different. I really like that, and you can replicate it later in other pieces. So putting in a bit of tone, obviously. Here you can see down the bottom there's a few little blades of grass in white where I've used the candle wax. Now I'm back in with that sailor pen. It really does have quite a spontaneous sort of feel to it. So it's a lot of fun to mess about with. I fully recommend getting something like this. It's a bit like a fountain pen, really, with a bent nib on the end. But yeah, it really gives you a chance to do something a little bit of fun. Have a little bit of fun with the pen lines. So next week we'll carry on doing these, and gonna maybe introduce a few other techniques and materials next week as well. Eventually we'll be looking at foliage too. Somebody mentioned talking about atmospheric perspective a little bit, so hoping to do a little bit of that with you. So I hope you can tune in and enjoy that as well. There we go. So thanks for coming, and I'll see you next week. Bye.